The echo of becoming, listening to the whisper of your next self. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own life? Trapped behind a mask that no longer fits? That subtle discomfort is not failure. It is the quiet frequency of your future self trying to emerge. There are moments when life looks the same on the surface, but feels different underneath. Your routine continues. Your roles remain. Your environment appears unchanged. And yet, something no longer fits. A subtle static begins to move through ordinary moments. Habits you once moved through easily now feel heavy. Conversations that once felt natural now feel rehearsed. Spaces that once felt comfortable now feel restrictive. This is not failure. It is misalignment revealing itself. The quiet friction that appears when your current habits no longer match your evolving potential. Growth rarely announces itself loudly. More often, it arrives as discomfort without a clear source. You may find yourself restless in routines that once satisfied you, unmoved by goals that once motivated you, detached from identities that once defined you. This is the signal of becoming. Comfort zones are built from familiarity, not permanence. And what was once supportive can quietly become limiting, especially now, within a landscape that is rapidly changing. Digital environments accelerate identity shifts. Roles evolve quickly. Expectations multiply across both physical and online worlds. But internal growth follows its own rhythm. So when long-standing patterns suddenly feel hollow, it is not instability. It is expansion pressing against an outdated structure. There is also a deeper form of dissonance that emerges during transition. Your old persona still attempts to operate. It still reaches for familiar solutions. It still repeats learned responses. But the self emerging within you has already outgrown them. So you feel conflict. Part of you moving forward, part of you repeating, part of you expanding, part of you performing. This internal dissonance is not confusion. It is transition. You are no longer fully who you were, and not yet fully living as who you are becoming. And in that in-between space, friction is natural because the whisper of your next self is already present. The signal of becoming is rarely loud. It does not compete with noise. It does not argue with expectation. It does not demand attention. It repeats quietly. But in a world saturated with external pressure, subtle internal signals are easily drowned out. Social comparison, cultural expectation, digital visibility, performance-based identity, all of these amplify the external voice and suppress the internal one. So decoding the whisper requires turning inward, beyond pressure, beyond expectation, beyond visibility. You begin to notice recurring thoughts about who you are becoming. Not dramatic fantasies, but steady inclinations, persistent curiosities, repeated inner nudges. There is also a distinction to recognize. The ego seeks elevation, recognition, status. The emerging self seeks expansion, alignment, depth. One is loud and urgent. The other is steady and consistent. When you learn to differentiate them, clarity increases. Restlessness becomes information. Discomfort becomes direction. Dissonance becomes data. Active internal listening begins here. You pause. You observe. You translate feeling into meaning. And what was once vague unease becomes guidance for your next phase. But becoming does not only involve expansion, it also requires release. As you evolve, certain identities begin to loosen. Roles you once inhabited naturally begin to feel performative. Masks that once protected you begin to feel restrictive. So part of the process is auditing what you are carrying. Which roles still feel aligned? Which identities still feel true? Which expressions still feel like you? And which ones feel rehearsed, obligatory, maintained for expectation rather than authenticity? Over time, it becomes possible to live inside a persona that once served you well, but no longer fits the self you are becoming. This realization can bring grief, not because the past was false, but because it is complete. You may feel tenderness toward former versions of yourself, respect for what they endured, appreciation for how they protected you, and also recognition that remaining there would limit your movement now. Outgrowing yourself is not rejection, it is continuity. Each phase served a purpose. Each identity carried you forward. Each mask provided function when it was needed. But evolution requires space. New frequencies cannot stabilize in structures already filled with outdated narratives. So shedding becomes necessary, releasing attachments, softening rigid self-definitions, letting go of stories that no longer describe you accurately. This clearing is not emptiness. It is preparation, bandwidth returning, energy freeing, identity loosening, so that the self emerging within you has room to exist without compression. Once the old structures begin to loosen, something new becomes audible, not fully formed, not fully stable, but present, the emerging rhythm of who you are becoming. At first, it feels unfamiliar, even slightly unnatural, because the future self does not arrive fully practiced. It arrives as inclination, preference, curiosity. So amplification begins through small alignment, tiny actions that resonate with the values of your evolving identity, even before they feel automatic. A different choice, a new boundary, a subtle shift in response, each one a rehearsal. The nervous system learns through repetition. Identity stabilizes through experience. So what begins as intention gradually becomes pattern. Visualization strengthens this process. When you allow yourself to imagine the self you are becoming in clear environments, in specific moments, in lived situations, the whisper gains volume. The mind begins recognizing possibility as familiarity. Environment also matters. Spaces that reflect your direction reinforce your rhythm. Objects, language, routines, digital inputs, each one either amplifies the new identity or anchors the old one. And then something important occurs. Evidence begins to accumulate. Small confirmations, moments of congruence, decisions that feel right after they are made. These are signals, proof that the new rhythm is stabilizing. And with each small alignment, self-doubt loses volume. Because identity confidence does not come from declaration, it comes from lived repetition. So amplification is not forcing transformation, it is practicing it gently, consistently, until what was once a whisper becomes your dominant rhythm. As the new rhythm stabilizes, growth begins to feel different, less forced, less strained, less driven by urgency. There is a quiet shift from striving toward unfolding. You no longer feel the need to push constantly, to grind identity into place, to force transformation through effort alone, because authentic expansion does not behave like pressure, it behaves like emergence. Something that develops naturally once conditions align, once old structures have loosened, once new patterns have rehearsed, once internal direction has clarified. growth begins to move on its own rhythm, not rushed, not stagnant, but continuous. There is also a space within becoming that is often overlooked. The quiet interval between intention and manifestation. The phase where change is stabilizing beneath visibility, where identity reorganizes internally before it appears externally. This space requires trust, not forcing, not rushing, not doubting, but allowing. You begin to recognize that transformation unfolds in timing, not pressure. And from this understanding, a new relationship with growth forms. Expansion becomes rhythmic, sustainable, unforced. You no longer chase becoming, you resonate into it. And as each emerging self stabilizes, another whisper eventually appears, not as disruption, but as continuation. Because becoming is not a single arrival, it is a living sequence. So you remain open, listening, adjusting, evolving, allowing each new rhythm to emerge, the moment the current one becomes your baseline.